I'm not a quitter. I'm not a guy who walks away from something that he started. I always finish, because I will finish this too, but just in a different way.
Well, what kind of a guy goes to every city, has sex with every girl, then he catches HIV? And is that someone we want to respect and tell our kids about? I think he should be ashamed of himself.
You are my brother. Let me apologize to you if I hurt you, that we haven't been together.
He was racist. Those three words sum up the darkest moment in Magic Johnson's life. One of the most beloved athletes in history was told he was not good enough to sit courtside at an NBA game, not because of his skills, but because of the color of his skin. This is the story of 5 men who hurt Magic Johnson in ways that cut deeper than any loss on the court. Some were his brothers, some were his rivals, and one was pure evil. Magic Johnson is a name that brings smiles. The architect of Showtime, a billionaire who brought hope to Black communities. But beneath that smile lies a history of betrayal, of racism, of fear. These 5 men tested Magic when he was vulnerable. They questioned his humanity. They spread lies. And one tried to erase everything he built. This is not just about basketball. This is about survival. Let me take you back to April 2014. TMZ and Deadspin released audio recordings that shook the sports world. The voice belonged to Donald Sterling, owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. The man had been caught in a private argument with his mistress, and what he said about Magic Johnson was unforgivable. Sterling was angry because his mistress had posted a photo on Instagram, a simple photo with Magic Johnson, and Sterling could not stand it. Listen to what he said. "It bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you are associating with Black people. Do you have to? You can sleep with them. You can bring them in. The little I ask you is not to promote it and not to bring them to my games. Not to bring them to my games." Magic Johnson was not welcome at Clippers games. Not as a fan, not as a legend, because he was Black. This was not ignorance. This was institutional racism. Magic was a minority owner of the Dodgers by 2014, a business titan. He had built an empire. But to Sterling, none of that mattered. Sterling wanted to curate a white world, and Magic had no place in it. This is plantation mentality. Black athletes celebrated for their labor on the court, shunned as social equals off it. If you think Magic Johnson's story of pain and resilience matters, subscribe to this channel, drop a comment below, and tell me who you think hurt Magic the most. Was it the owner who denied his humanity, or the brother who betrayed him in his darkest hour? Let me know what you think. But Sterling was not done. After the audio leaked, he went on CNN, and what he said was even worse. He attacked Magic's character. He weaponized Magic's HIV status.
Big Magic Johnson, what has he done? He has got AIDS. What kind of a guy goes to every city, has sex with every girl, then he catches HIV? Is that someone we want to respect and tell our kids about? Let that sink in.
Sterling conflated HIV with AIDS to spread fear. He questioned Magic's morals while caught on tape berating his own mistress. Then he tried to erase Magic's legacy.
Did he help anybody in South LA? He does nothing. He is all talk.
This was a lie. The Magic Johnson Foundation had invested millions into urban development. Sterling was trying to strip Magic of everything to maintain a hierarchy where only white owners are seen as providers. Magic Johnson is a man of faith. He said he forgave Sterling. "I am a God-fearing man. I am a Christian, so I have to forgive him." But forgiveness does not mean no consequences. The NBA banned Sterling for life, fined him $2.5 million. Players like LeBron James and Chris Paul threatened to boycott. Sterling was forced to sell the Clippers. He is the only owner in major American sports stripped of his franchise for racial hatred. Magic forgave spiritually, but the punishment was permanent. Now let me tell you about betrayal from someone you love. Isaiah Thomas was Magic's best friend. They were brothers. In the 80s, the Lakers and Pistons were bitter rivals, but Magic and Isaiah were different. They exchanged a kiss on the cheek at mid-court before the 1988 finals, a gesture that shocked everyone. They were closer than teammates. They were family. But that bond shattered in 1991. Magic announced he had HIV. The world was in shock, the height of the AIDS panic. People did not understand the virus. Magic needed his brothers, and he expected Isaiah to be his fiercest defender. Instead, Isaiah allegedly did the opposite. Reports reached Magic that Isaiah was spreading rumors about his sexuality. In his 2009 book, Magic spelled it out. Isaiah kept questioning people about it. "I keep hearing Magic is gay. I could not believe it. The one guy I thought I could count on had all these doubts. It was like he kicked me in the stomach. Your best friend, the man you kissed on national television, now whispering you might be gay." In 1991, that was not gossip. That was a weapon. HIV was linked to the gay community in the public mind. To question Magic's sexuality was to strip him of his identity as a masculine icon. It threatened his standing in the black community. It threatened his endorsements. It threatened everything. And Isaiah allegedly used that stigma to distance himself from a tainted star, to protect his own brand. That is the ultimate betrayal. The consequences were real. Isaiah Thomas was one of the greatest point guards in NBA history, but he was left off the 1992 Olympic Dream Team. For years, no one knew why. Then, Magic admitted the truth in his book. Isaiah killed his own chances when it came to the Olympics. Nobody on that team wanted to play with him. Michael Jordan did not want to play with him. Scottie Pippen wanted no part of him. Bird was not pushing for him. Karl Malone did not want him. Magic helped blackball Isaiah. The Brotherhood decided to exile him. Jordan had his reasons. The Pistons had brutalized him with the Jordan Rules defense. But Magic's withdrawal of support was the final blow. Isaiah was punished for what he did in 1991, and Magic never spoke to him for decades. That silence altered history. It changed the Dream Team roster, and it destroyed a friendship that once seemed unbreakable. In 2017, they finally reconciled. On NBA TV, Magic and Isaiah sat face to face. Magic wept. He apologized. "You are my brother. Let me apologize to you if I hurt you, that we have not been together." They embraced. But 26 years had been lost. Two men who loved each other had spent nearly 3 decades in silence. The damage was permanent. Magic may have forgiven Isaiah, but those lost years can never be recovered. Karl Malone represents a different kind of cruelty. Not personal betrayal, but public rejection based on fear. In 1992, Magic was voted into the All-Star Game by fans. Despite having retired in November 1991, the people wanted to see him play. His return was a moment for HIV visibility, a chance to show the world that life goes on. But not everyone was ready, and Karl Malone made sure everyone knew it. Malone went to the media with his concerns. "Look at this. Scabs and cuts all over me. I get these every night, every game. They cannot tell you that you are not at risk. And you cannot tell me there is one guy in the NBA who has not fought about it." He was talking about playing against Magic. He said he would not play against a guy who has AIDS. Once again, someone conflated HIV with AIDS. Magic was reduced to a disease. Not a player, not a legend, a threat. Malone gave voice to the fears of conservative America. He validated the stigma, and in doing so, he stripped Magic of his livelihood. This was not ignorance in private. This was a public execution. Malone's comments overshadowed the entire All-Star weekend. Magic felt the weight of it. He knew that his presence was now controversial, not because of anything he did, but because of fear. Fear that Malone championed. The consequences were immediate. Magic tried a brief comeback in November 1992, but the controversy would not die. Players were uncomfortable. The media kept asking questions, and Magic decided to retire again. He cited the distraction, but the truth was simple. Karl Malone and others like him made it impossible for Magic to play. They took years of his prime, not the virus, the fear of the virus. And Malone was the loudest voice spreading that fear. Magic and Malone have been cordial since then. Magic has said he understands the ignorance of that time, but understanding is not the same as forgetting. Malone's words forced Magic into retirement. That is a fact. The damage to Magic's career is permanent, and while Magic may have moved on, the history books remember. Karl Malone helped end Magic Johnson's playing days. That is unforgiven by time itself. Larry Bird is the outlier on this list. He started as an enemy, but became Magic's greatest friend. Yet the origin of their conflict is soaked in racism. From the moment they met in the 1979 NCAA championship game, Bird and Magic were cast as symbols. White America versus Black America. The media built a narrative that was impossible to ignore, and it was drenched in racial coding. Larry Bird was described as smart, blue-collar, playing from the neck up. His lack of traditional athleticism was framed as a virtue, proof of his intelligence and work ethic. Magic Johnson was described as gifted, flashy, naturally talented, as if his genius required no thought, no practice, no intellectual rigor. This was not accidental. This was the way white media diminished Black excellence. Bird's success was effort. Magic's success was genetics. Magic hated Bird in the early years, not just because he wore a Celtics jersey, but because of what he represented. The fans in Boston Garden screamed racial slurs at the Lakers. They cheered for Bird as the great white hope. Magic felt the hatred, and he projected it onto Bird. It was easier to hate the man than to hate the system. But Bird rejected that role. He was offended when teams put white players to guard him. He saw it as disrespect. He believed only the best black athletes, like Michael Cooper or Magic Johnson, were worthy adversaries. Bird understood the game within the game, and he refused to be a pawn in a racial proxy war. The turning point came during a Converse commercial shoot in French Lick, Indiana. Magic met Bird's mother. The enemy became human. The racial spell was broken. Today, Magic calls Bird his greatest friend in the industry. They wrote a book together. They have stood side by side for decades. The feud is over. But Magic has never forgotten the racial hatred he endured in Boston. He forgave Bird, but he never forgave the system that used them both. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was supposed to be Magic's mentor. Instead, he was his coldest teammate. When Magic arrived in Los Angeles in 1979, Kareem was the established alpha, a Muslim convert, a civil rights activist who boycotted the 1968 Olympics. Kareem was serious, intellectual, and deeply wary of the media. Magic was the opposite, enthusiastic, eager to please, the face of the commercialized 80s, and apolitical. The clash was immediate. Magic hugged Kareem after a regular season win. Kareem viewed it as immature. Magic viewed Kareem's aloofness as arrogance. They barely spoke. The locker room was tense. This was not just about personalities. This was about the evolution of black stardom. Kareem carried the scars of the 60s. Magic reaped the rewards of the 80s. To the older generation, Magic's smile looked like performance. To the younger generation, Kareem's stoicism looked like bitterness. It took decades for this relationship to heal. Magic's HIV diagnosis softened Kareem. Magic's transformation into a business mogul earned Kareem's respect. Today, Magic calls Kareem his captain, the greatest of all time in college basketball. They are friends now, but the decade of silence in the Lakers locker room shaped an entire dynasty. It was a cold war, and both men felt the freeze. Michael Jordan represents the final betrayal, not of friendship, but of legacy. Jordan was the younger brother, the heir to the throne, and in 1991, he took it. The Bulls defeated the Lakers in the NBA Finals. The changing of the guard was complete. But the transition was not smooth. Magic struggled to let go, and Jordan refused to yield. During the 1992 Dream Team practices, Magic tried to assert dominance, but Jordan was now the champion. The famous scrimmage in Monte Carlo was the moment Jordan killed the Magic era. Magic later admitted it. He just took over. It was his league now. That ego death was painful. Watching Jordan ascend meant accepting that Magic's time was over. But there is another layer, a shared silence. In 1991, Craig Hodges urged both Jordan and Magic to boycott Game 1 of the finals, to protest racial injustice and police brutality after the Rodney King beating. Jordan told Hodges he was crazy. Magic told Hodges that was too extreme. Both men chose corporate interests over activism. They were bound together by that choice. But it separated them from the tradition of Kareem, the tradition of standing for something beyond the game. And then there is the Isaiah Thomas question. Who really blackballed Isaiah from the Dream Team? Magic blames Jordan. Jordan blamed others. Both men have deflected for decades. That pact of silence suggests a lingering guilt, a shared responsibility for exiling a brother. Magic and Jordan are peers today, but the competitive tension remains. And the unanswered questions about Isaiah hang in the air. So let me break this down. Not all of these men are equal. Donald Sterling denied Magic's humanity because of race. That is institutional evil. That is unforgivable. Isaiah Thomas betrayed Magic in his most vulnerable moment. That is personal devastation. Karl Malone stripped Magic of his career out of fear. That is professional destruction. Larry Bird was weaponized by a racist system, but rejected it. That is redemption. Kareem and Jordan represent generational conflict. That is evolution. Magic Johnson survived all of it. He survived racism, he survived fear, he survived betrayal, he survived erasure. And he came out the other side as a billionaire, as a legend, as a man who changed the game forever. Donald Sterling is banned. Isaiah Thomas is reconciled but scarred. Karl Malone is history. Larry Bird is family. Kareem and Jordan are peers. But Magic stands alone, not as a victim, but as a victor. The smile you see today is not a mask. It is armor, forged in the fires of these battles. Magic Johnson learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means surviving. It means outlasting those who tried to diminish you. And it means rewriting the rules so the next generation does not have to fight the same wars. Magic Johnson names 5 players he will never forgive. But the truth is more complex. He forgave them all spiritually, but history will never forget what they did, and neither should we. Because these stories are not just about Magic Johnson. They are about every black man who has had to smile through black. The pain, who's had to prove his humanity, who has had to survive in a world that sees him as a threat. Magic Johnson is not just a basketball player. He is a symbol of resilience. And that is why his story matters. If this deep dive into Magic Johnson's life moved you, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment about what resilience means to you. Share your thoughts on how Magic survived the unthinkable. And stick around, because we have more stories like this coming. Stories about legends who changed the game and the battles they fought to get there. Thank you for watching, and remember, the smile is armor, but the story is survival.
And even the NBA was kind of second fiddle to it in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So it was a real heavy expectation. It was an honor to be there, but then it was a lot of pressure, you know, a lot of pressure I put on myself, you know, am I good enough, a lot of pressure. Words cannot express how grateful and excited I am. So I prepared remarks and simply want to thank some people.
At 72 years old, Jamal Wilkes finally opened up about 5 NBA legends he will never forgive. And these aren't just casual beefs or petty disagreements between old athletes. These are the men who fundamentally altered the trajectory of his life, his legacy, and his entire place in basketball history forever. Silk, as he was known throughout his playing career, was a 4-time NBA champion, a 2-time NCAA champion, and a Hall of Famer whose resume rivals the greatest icons of all time. Yet he remains somehow a footnote while others tower in the spotlight like giants. The reason? 5 men, 5 unforgivable debts. 5 reasons why, even at 72, looking back at a legendary career of sustained excellence and championship success, there are chapters he still can't close. These aren't regrets exactly. These are the scars that shaped him into who he became. The first of these legends is Bob Love, and to understand why Wilkes can never forgive him, you have to first understand what Love represented in that era. In 1974, when the Golden State Warriors drafted Wilkes with the 11th overall pick, the NBA was a completely different animal than what we know today. This wasn't the finesse league it would become. This was the drug-fueled, enforcer-heavy 1970s where physical dominance ruled everything and defined entire careers. Scouts looked at Wilkes and saw something that genuinely frightened them. Here was a 6'6" guy weighing less than 200 pounds, with a UCLA pedigree and a weird, absolutely beautiful jump shot. Too thin, too soft. Too much college, not enough street toughness. Bob Love made it his personal mission to prove that those doubts were absolutely right. Love was everything Wilkes wasn't. A stutterer who had clawed his way up from Southern University, Love played with a chip on his shoulder the size of Chicago itself. He was a physical, aggressive scorer who used his body as a weapon and didn't apologize for it. In the 1974-75 season, he averaged 22 points and over 6 rebounds a game, leading the Bulls with an attitude that said, "I belong here and you don't." Period. No debate. The crucible came in the 1975 Western Conference Finals. 7 brutal games. The Warriors and Bulls were evenly matched, but the individual battle at forward between Wilkes and Love was the pivot point of absolutely everything that would follow. For an entire series, Love tested Wilkes' durability and pain tolerance on every single possession. He posted him up, drove his shoulder directly into Wilkes' chest, challenged the rookie to hold his ground, and prove he belonged. Love didn't see a future Hall of Famer. He saw a kid who needed to be broken down and rebuilt from scratch. Game 6 came with the Bulls facing elimination. Love exploded, schooling the Warriors' defense with 20 points and physical dominance. But then came Game 7, the deciding matchup. In an 83-79 defensive slugfest, the Warriors won. While Rick Barry got the headlines and praise, it was Wilkes' defensive resilience against Love that saved the entire team. He held his own, using his length and quickness to counter Love's strength and aggression. Love averaged 21 points on 43.7% shooting in that entire playoff run. Wilkes averaged 15 points on 44.6% shooting. The efficiency was absolutely there. The defense was stellar, but the physical scars were permanent and lasting. Give this video some hype if you're feeling Silk's story so far. By surviving that series, Wilkes shed the too thin label forever. He became an all-defensive second-team selection the very next year, and again the year after that. But he will never forgive Love for the physical toll, for the bruises, for forcing him to learn that survival in the NBA is a skill as important as shooting ability. Love didn't just beat him, Love made him into a survivor. And that's what makes it unforgivable, because it cost him something he could never get back, no matter how many rings he won later. The second legend is Rick Barry. If Bob Love was the external enemy forcing physical pain, Rick Barry was the internal saboteur working from within. And this one stings differently because it's personal betrayal. Barry was a future Hall of Famer, one of the most talented scorers in basketball history. He was also notoriously difficult and toxic to teammates. A perfectionist who lacked the emotional intelligence to lead without destroying people. For a rookie like Wilkes, who thrived on harmony and collective purpose, who was raised in John Wooden's pyramid of success at UCLA, Barry was a shock to the entire system. Barry led by intimidation and constant critique, not by empowerment or building people up. The 1975 Warriors championship is remembered as the greatest upset in NBA Finals history. They swept the heavily favored Washington Bullets in dominant fashion. The narrative focuses entirely on Barry's brilliance. He was the Finals MVP. He carried the team on his shoulders. But the structural reality of that team relied completely on Wilkes' contributions. Wilkes averaged 14.2 points and 8.2 rebounds, serving as the perfect Robin to Barry's Batman. But there's no joy in being a Robin to someone so volatile and self-centered. Barry demanded the ball in the spotlight constantly and obsessively. Wilkes, naturally unselfish and team-oriented, acquiesced to every demand. The constant pressure of playing alongside a genius who resented sharing any space wore him down mentally and emotionally. In Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals against Chicago, when Love was physically tormenting him, it was actually Wilkes who carried the team offensively when Barry struggled early in the contest. Wilkes shot 10 for 19 and scored 23 points in that critical game. That's the game winner. That's the moment that launched the dynasty. But in the post-game narratives and subsequent finals coverage, Barry absorbed all the oxygen, all the glory, all the mythology, all the attention and praise. The friction between them reached its breaking point in 1977. Despite on-court success and a championship ring, Wilkes made a historic and personal decision. He left the Warriors. This was the dawn of the free agency era, and Wilkes became one of the first major stars to voluntarily change teams. He signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. The research is explicit. Barry's difficult personality was a primary factor in Wilkes' decision to leave. Think about that for a second. A championship environment that became unbearable by one man's toxicity. A title-winning core abandoned because the emotional tax was too high to continue paying. Later in life, Barry softened his approach. He publicly advocated for Wilkes' Hall of Fame induction, calling him the ideal teammate and role model. But forgiveness in the personal sense doesn't erase the professional scar. Barry robbed Wilkes of the joy of that first championship run. He made young Silk realize that talent alone does not make a leader. That's a lesson Wilkes carried forward into his relationships with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, leaders who, unlike Barry, empowered him rather than diminished him constantly. By 1980, Jamal Wilkes was an established star for the Los Angeles Lakers. His new rival was Julius Erving of the Philadelphia 76ers. This rivalry was profoundly different from the others. It was defined by mutual respect and admiration. Both players were labeled as the classiest in the entire league, but Erving represents something far darker than physical or psychological challenges, obscuration and erasure. Dr. J wasn't just a player, he was a cultural phenomenon. He was the dunk, the afro, the shoe deal, the essence of cool. Wilkes, with his unusual shot and quiet demeanor, was the absolute antithesis of that brand. When they matched up, the media narrative was always about the doctor. Even when Wilkes outplayed him decisively, the camera lens remained fixed on Erving. The 1980 NBA Finals is the crucible of this rivalry. This series is immortalized for Game 6, where rookie Magic Johnson started at center for the injured Kareem and scored 42 points in a legendary performance. This game became the genesis myth of the Magic Johnson legend, but something absolutely unforgivable happened in that exact same game. Jamal Wilkes scored 37 points and grabbed 10 rebounds in the championship-clinching victory. He dominated the entire 76ers defense. He torched Erving repeatedly with his corner jumper and baseline cuts. He delivered a complete masterpiece. Yet because he was playing against Dr. J, the cultural icon, and alongside Magic, the new icon, his performance was relegated to a historical footnote. Magic got 42 and 15. The media called it the greatest rookie performance ever recorded. Wilkes got 37 and 10 and was virtually forgotten by history. On that same night, Erving scored 27 points and controlled the narrative. Wilkes outplayed him decisively. Bill Russell, watching these matchups carefully, declared the Erving versus Wilkes battle a complete wash. For a defensive-minded role-player perception to exist around Wilkes while Erving was considered a god, Russell's assessment was a vindication. It meant Wilkes had neutralized the best player on the planet. But being awash with a legend is a thankless task. It requires a level of consistent, grinding excellence that goes completely uncelebrated. Wilkes had to play perfect positional defense to contain Irving's athleticism. He had to score efficiently to match Irving's flair. The mental exhaustion of maintaining parity with a cultural deity is the debt Irving owes him. In 1982, the Lakers faced the Sixers again. Wilkes continued to produce at a high level. The dynamic remained. Irving was the protagonist of the tragedy. Wilkes was merely the instrument of his defeat. The basketball world, entranced by Irving's magnetism, refused to grant Wilkes the title of superstar, even as he dismantled the reigning superstar twice on the biggest stage. By 1984, the small forward position was evolving rapidly. Larry Bird brought something entirely new to the game. He brought a combination of size, rebounding power, and shooting range that Wilkes, slender and aging, struggled to match. Bird was 6'9" and 220 pounds. Wilkes was 6'6" and under 200 pounds. Bird was not just a scorer. He was a physical bully who used his hips, elbows, and size to wear defenders into absolute submission. Bird represents unforgivable domination in its truest form, no mercy. Wilkes has explicitly referred to guarding Bird as a nightmare scenario. He said it himself. He was a perimeter player, a playmaker, and a driver. Endless trouble. But every night was tough, man. You had to guard Larry on a Monday night. Are you kidding me? Bird targeted Wilkes intentionally. He knew Wilkes was too thin to push him off the block, and by 1984, too slow to chase him off screens. Bird's trash talk, legendary in its cruelty, likely focused on these insecurities. He made Wilkes feel every single year of his age. In the 1984 finals, Bird dominated every game. The Celtics won in 7 games in a series nobody expected to be so close. The series is known as the Tragic Johnson Series because Magic made crucial mistakes. But for Wilkes, it was a personal defeat of the highest order. He struggled to impact the series as he had in 1980 or 1982. Bird's relentless excellence exposed Wilkes' declining athleticism. Before Bird, Wilkes was silk, ageless and smooth and efficient. After battling Bird in 1984, Wilkes looked mortal. Bird stripped away the aura of invincibility that Wilkes had carefully constructed over a decade of winning championships and playing at the highest level. The Lakers management looked at that series and immediately saw what Bird had revealed. They realized they could not beat Boston with Wilkes as the primary option on Bird anymore. This realization led directly to the elevation of Michael Cooper and James Worthy in their defensive schemes. Bird forced the end. He forced obsolescence. And Wilkes will never forgive him for that exposure, for proving he was breakable, for accelerating the clock on his career. The final figure on this list is James Worthy, and this one is the cruelest of all because it's the most intimate and personal betrayal. The relationship between Jamal Wilkes and James Worthy is a Shakespearean tragedy disguised as a sports rivalry. Worthy represents unforgivable obsolescence in its most painful form. The Lakers acquired the #1 overall pick in the 1982 draft. They used it to select James Worthy, a 6'9" athletic marvel from North Carolina, who was essentially a turbocharged version of the modern small forward. Most veterans would resent a rookie coming for their job and starting role. Wilkes, true to his character, embraced Worthy completely. He mentored him. They became close friends off the court. Worthy spoke of Wilkes with immense love, saying he showed him so much care and guidance. This friendship makes what happened next absolutely unforgivable. By teaching Worthy how to be a professional, Wilkes accelerated his own demise. He sharpened the blade that would cut him from the roster. For 2 seasons, they coexisted peacefully. Wilkes started. Worthy came off the bench or played alongside him. But the 1984 loss to Bird made it clear the Lakers needed more dynamism. They needed youth. The end came abruptly on February 1st, 1985. Against the New York Knicks, Wilkes suffered a torn ligament in his left knee after a collision with another player. He missed the final 40 games of the season. In his absence, James Worthy blossomed beyond anyone's expectations. He moved into the starting lineup and became Big Game James. The Lakers' offense became faster and more explosive. They returned to the finals in 1985, faced the Celtics, and finally beat them. Wilkes watched from the sidelines. He received a ring. He was part of the team, but he knew he had contributed nothing to the final triumph over Bird. The ring felt hollow because the victory belonged to someone else. The Lakers waived Wilkes shortly after. He finished his career with a brief, forgettable stint on the Clippers. The friendship with Worthy remained. They stayed close throughout their lives. But the professional wound never truly heals. Worthy is the living reminder that time waits for no one, that even the smoothest game gets replaced by something younger, faster, and stronger. Worthy proved that the Lakers didn't need Wilkes anymore. There is no greater pain for a competitor than irrelevance itself. At 72, looking back on all of this, Wilkes sits with these 5 unforgivable debts. Bob Love took away his innocence with welts and bruises. Rick Barry poisoned his first championship with toxicity and resentment. Julius Erving eclipsed his greatest performances with cultural magnetism he couldn't control or match. Larry Bird exposed his mortality and accelerated his decline. James Worthy, his friend, rendered him redundant and replaceable. These 5 legends are the architects of Jamal Wilkes' exile from the pantheon of the greatest ever. They are the reason he is remembered as a winner rather than as a superstar. They took pieces of his narrative and claimed them for themselves, but in doing so, they also forged him. Without the fire of love, the pressure of Barry, the standard of Irving, the test of Bird, and the succession of Worthy, there is no Silk. There is no Hall of Famer. There is no legacy of quiet excellence and dignity that defines his entire career and life. At 72, looking back on all of this, Wilkes sits with these 5 unforgivable debts. Bob Love took away his innocence with welts and bruises. Rick Barry poisoned his first championship with toxicity and resentment. Julius Erving eclipsed his greatest performances with cultural magnetism he couldn't control or match. Larry Bird exposed his mortality and accelerated his decline. James Worthy, his friend, rendered him redundant and replaceable. These 5 legends are the architects of Jamal Wilkes' exile from the pantheon of the greatest ever. They are the reason he is remembered as a winner rather than as a superstar. They took pieces of his narrative and claimed them for themselves, but in doing so, they also forged him. Without the fire of love, the pressure of Barry, the standard of Irving, the test of Bird, and the succession of Worthy, always.
I would train with Michael. I guess the last 3 championships that we won, we trained together at his house. But other than that, we didn't really put a lot of time in away from basketball. Most of our time was spent, whether we were working out or on the practice floor.
I really don't have regrets. I am a person that says, look back in your history and you come up with something that you feel like you want to change, something else has to change. Once again, that's the same analogy. Disappointment to me, to win, you got to lose.
Michael Jordan, 6 championships, 5 MVPs, the greatest basketball player of all time. But behind the perfect image is a man who holds grudges like no other. And many of these grudges tie back to race in ways that shock people. Today we're breaking down the 5 NBA players Michael Jordan will never forgive, and the dark truth behind why he can't let go. Most people don't know this, but Jordan's inability to forgive started long before the NBA. Back in 1977, Jordan was just a 14-year-old kid in Wilmington, North Carolina. A white female classmate called him the N-word. Jordan's response was immediate. He threw a soda at her. He got suspended from school. But the real damage happened inside his mind. In Roland Lazenby's biography, Jordan admitted something shocking. He said, "I was really rebelling. I considered myself a racist at the time. Basically, I was against all white people." Think about that for a second. The Michael Jordan we know, the guy who became the face of corporate America, had started out with deep racial anger. His mother Dolores helped him move past the hatred, but the mechanism stayed. The way he dealt with that white classmate, identifying an enemy and destroying them without forgiveness, became his blueprint. In the NBA, the enemies changed, but Jordan's refusal to forgive never did. Now let's talk about the biggest grudge of them all, Isiah Thomas. This feud goes so deep that it rewrote basketball history. It all started in 1985 at the All-Star Game in Indianapolis. Jordan was a rookie, fresh, confident, wearing gold chains and Nike gear, but the veterans didn't like his attitude. Isiah Thomas, who was the president of the Players Association, allegedly organized a freeze-out. Along with George Gervin and Magic Johnson, they refused to pass Jordan the ball. Thomas denies it was planned, but Jordan saw it differently. He saw it as an attempt to humble him, to put him in his place. And he never forgot. The tension exploded in 1987 after a playoff series between the Pistons and Celtics. Dennis Rodman said Larry Bird was overrated and only won MVPs because he was white. When reporters asked Isiah Thomas about it, he agreed. Thomas said, if he were black, he'd be just another good guy. The media destroyed Thomas. He was called a reverse racist. He had to hold a press conference with Bird to apologize. It nearly ended his career, and where was Michael Jordan during all of this? Silent. Jordan stayed neutral. He protected his marketability. While Thomas was in the trenches fighting racial double standards, Jordan floated above it all. This likely deepened the rift between them. Then came the Jordan rules. The Pistons created a defensive strategy to physically punish Jordan every time he drove to the basket. The media coverage of this rivalry was heavily racialized. The Pistons were called the Bad Boys. They were depicted as thugs, gangsters, street fighters. These were coded racist terms. The Pistons represented Detroit, Detroit, a black working-class city. Meanwhile, Jordan and the Bulls were the saviors. They played the game the right way. They were elegant and artistic. The media created a morality play, the polished, safe Jordan against the dangerous Thomas. Jordan leaned into this narrative hard. He complained to the league about the physicality. He painted the Pistons as illegitimate champions. When the Bulls finally swept Detroit in 1991, the Pistons walked off the court without shaking hands. Jordan used this moment to permanently cast Thomas as a villain, but Thomas argues this was standard practice back then. The Celtics had walked off on the Pistons years earlier with no backlash. Thomas believes Jordan fixated on the handshake to delegitimize the Pistons' 2 championships and make sure they were remembered as thugs instead of champions. But the ultimate act of revenge came in 1992, the Dream Team. This was the most prestigious basketball roster ever assembled, and Isaiah Thomas, one of the greatest point guards of all time, was left off. Why? Michael Jordan. Audio recordings confirm that Jordan told Rod Thorne, a selection committee member, "I don't want to play if Isaiah Thomas is on the team." Jordan was given veto power, and he used it. Thomas was erased from the biggest moment in basketball history. This wasn't just a personal grudge, this was systemic. The NBA and USA Basketball prioritized Jordan's comfort over merit. They allowed one marketable superstar to erase another black player's legacy. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment below. Do you think Michael Jordan was justified in keeping Isaiah Thomas off the Dream Team? Let me know your thoughts. Thomas has framed this exclusion as a form of betrayal. In recent interviews, he's talked about how black athletes often tear each other down because the system only allows one black man on top at a time. By participating in Thomas's exclusion, Jordan enforced a system that treats players as disposable. The Last Dance documentary in 2020 poured fuel on this fire. Thomas felt the documentary was propaganda designed to protect Jordan's legacy. But what offended Thomas most was how it portrayed the Pistons as thugs all over again. Thomas has become increasingly vocal, linking Jordan's behavior to how black history gets sanitized. He argues that by demonizing the Pistons, Jordan and the media engage in erasure, preferring safe narratives over the complex truth. Now let's talk about Scottie Pippen. If Isaiah Thomas is the external enemy, Scottie Pippen is the internal betrayal. For 2 decades, Pippen was Jordan's Robin, the ultimate silent partner. But after The Last Dance, Pippen became Jordan's most vicious critic. In his memoir, Unguarded, Pippen said Jordan used the documentary to glorify himself while reducing his teammates to props. Pippen wrote, "I was nothing more than a prop. His best teammate of all time, he called me. He couldn't have been more condescending if he tried." Pippen's critique cuts deep because it's about economics. He argues the Bulls' dynasty was a team effort, but Jordan hoarded all the glory and the money. Pippen was famously underpaid because he signed a long-term contract out of financial desperation. Meanwhile, Jordan became a billionaire. Pippen sees this as a plantation dynamic, where the labor force creates massive value, but only the superstar gets paid. Pippen feels Jordan aligned himself with ownership and corporate sponsors instead of standing with his teammates. The most explosive accusation involves Phil Jackson. Pippen accused Jackson of being racist. In the 1994 playoffs, with 1.8 seconds left in a tie game against the Knicks, Jackson designed the final shot for Tony Kukoc, a white European rookie, instead of Pippen, the team's established leader. When Dan Patrick asked Pippen if he was calling Phil a racist, Pippen said, "I don't got a problem with that." When Patrick asked if Phil was or is a racist, Pippen said, "Oh yeah, how does this tie to Jordan?" Jordan has defended Phil Jackson repeatedly, calling him a father figure and the greatest coach of all time. By deifying Jackson in The Last Dance and ignoring the disrespect shown to Pippen, Jordan became complicit. Pippen sees the elevation of Kukoc, the great white hope of the Bulls, as a direct insult to the black players who built the dynasty. Jordan's refusal to validate Pippen's feelings is the wedge between them. Pippen sees Jordan as someone who sold out his teammates to stay close to power. Pippen went even further. He claimed that Mike ruined basketball. His argument is that before Jordan, basketball was a team game focused on passing and collective movement. Like the 80s Lakers and Celtics, Jordan introduced hero ball, the isolation scorer who views teammates as obstacles. Pippen contrasts Jordan with LeBron James, who represents a team-first mentality. This is a sociological critique. Pippen values the communitarian spirit of black basketball culture over the hyper-individualistic capitalist model Jordan perfected. While Pippen hasn't directly called Jordan an Uncle Tom, the implication is there. The accusation within the black community is that Jordan was the house slave who kept other players in line for white ownership. Pippen points to instances where Jordan punched Steve Kerr or berated teammates as evidence, Jordan policed the locker room through fear, acting as management's enforcer. Pippen's resentment is that he nurtured younger players and built team chemistry, only for Jordan to terrorize them, take the credit, and leave. Next is Charles Barkley. This one hurts because Jordan and Barkley were best friends. They appeared on Oprah together, gambled together, golfed together. But they haven't spoken in over a decade. The rift happened in 2012 when Barkley, working as a TNT analyst, criticized Jordan's performance as an executive for the Charlotte Bobcats. Barkley said, "I love Michael, but he simply has not done a good job as an executive. He has surrounded himself with people who will not tell him no." Jordan called Barkley, screamed at him, and hung up. The friendship was over, but this feud reveals something deeper about how black public figures navigate power. Barkley has carved out a unique space as the unruly black voice in media. He's unafraid of controversy. He speaks his mind on race, sometimes defending police, sometimes attacking white racism, and sometimes criticizing the black community. He rejected the role model label in his famous Nike commercial, asserting his right to be flawed and human. Jordan is the opposite. He's the curated icon. He navigates race by transcending it through money and silence. He protects his brand at all costs. The racism angle here is about how they're received. Barkley is the jester who speaks truth to power, even when it's messy. Jordan is the king who demands absolute loyalty and silence. Jordan's inability to forgive Barkley shows his intolerance for public accountability. In Jordan's world, loyalty means never questioning the king in public. Barkley views his job as a commitment to honesty, a trait valued in the black tradition of telling it like it is. He refused to compromise his integrity for Jordan's ego. The feuds with Reggie Miller and Brian Russell are different. They're less about systemic racism and more about dominance. Reggie Miller was one of the few players who didn't fear Michael Jordan. Their rivalry was defined by constant trash talk and a physical fight in 1993. Miller represented a specific type, the skinny, relentless trash talker who refused to back down. The racism angle here is minimal, but the dominance angle is everything. In playground culture, which both Jordan and Miller brought to the NBA, respect is earned through conquest. Jordan can't forgive Miller because Miller never kissed the ring. Even in defeat, Miller pushed Jordan in the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals. Jordan's dislike for Miller is the dislike of a king for a subject who refuses to kneel. Brian Russell's feud is the pettiest and most revealing. In 1994, during Jordan's first retirement, Russell trash-talked Jordan, claiming he could guard him. Jordan remembered this for years. He used it as motivation to destroy Russell in the 1997 and 1998 finals, culminating in the famous last shot over Russell. But the grudge didn't end there. During his 2009 Hall of Fame induction speech, a moment meant for grace and reflection, Jordan flew Russell out specifically to mock him from the podium. Jordan said, "From this day forward, if I ever see him in shorts, I'm coming at him." This act was widely criticized as bullying, but viewed through the lens of Jordan's 1977 trauma, it makes sense. Jordan's mechanism for dealing with any challenge to his dignity is total humiliating annihilation. Whether it's a white girl with a racial slur or a black peer with a trash talk line, the response is the same: destruction. Jordan uses Russell as a living example of what happens to those who doubt him. We can't discuss Jordan's feuds without addressing the elephant in the room. During the 1990 Senate race in North Carolina, Jordan was asked to endorse Harvey Gantt, a black Democrat running against Jesse Helms. Helms was a notorious segregationist who opposed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. It was a clear moral choice for many in the black community. Jordan refused to endorse Gantt. When asked why, he reportedly said on the team bus, "Republicans buy sneakers too." While Jordan later claimed this was a joke, the sentiment aligned with his actions. He prioritized economic reach over racial solidarity. This decision created friction with peers who were more socially conscious, like Craig Hodges and Isaiah Thomas. Jordan's neutrality stands in stark contrast to athletes like Muhammad Ali, who lost his prime for refusing the draft, or Colin Kaepernick, who lost his career for kneeling. Jordan became a billionaire by staying silent. This activism gap is a hidden driver of the animosity from Thomas and Pippen. They view Jordan's success as partially illegitimate because it was purchased with his silence. He became the safe black man for white corporate America, while they dealt with being too black for the mainstream. In The Last Dance, Jordan defended himself, saying, "I never thought of myself as an activist. I thought of myself as a basketball player. Was that selfish? Probably, but that was my energy." This admission of selfishness validates Pippen's critique. Jordan admits he put his own success above the collective struggle. For men like Thomas, who grew up on Chicago's West Side, or Pippen, who came from poverty in Arkansas, this selfishness is a moral failing no amount of championships can erase. So what does all this mean? Michael Jordan's list of unforgiven players isn't random. It's a map of the psychological and sociological terrain he navigated to become the greatest. The racism angle is foundational. It begins in 1977 1987 Wilmington, where Jordan learned to react to racial hostility with rebellious aggression. In the NBA, this aggression was repurposed. He defeated the thug narrative of the Pistons by becoming the corporate icon, a victory that required distancing himself from the black radical tradition Thomas represented. He maintained dominance by enforcing a strict hierarchy that alienated his closest ally, mirroring plantation labor dynamics. He sacrificed genuine friendship for the preservation of his infallible image. Michael Jordan is a monument to individual achievement. He's the undisputed king of basketball, but the silence around him, the absence of Thomas, Pippen, and Barkley from his life, is the cost of the crown. His inability to forgive is the scar tissue of a life lived in constant combat, first against Southern racism, then against the brothers who dared challenge his supremacy. In the Game of Thrones that was the 1990s NBA, the only way for Jordan to win was to make sure everyone else lost. If you found this video eye-opening, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into basketball history. What do you think? Was Jordan's ruthlessness necessary for greatness, or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.